This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Welcome to this episode of Real Talk. Coming up in just a moment, prominent NDP MLA David Shepherd, the representative for constituents in Edmonton City Centre, is going to go on the record endorsing a candidate in the Alberta NDP leadership race. He's going to do it exclusively right here on Real Talk. This is obviously an interesting development, isn't it? When incumbent MLAs pick their horse, so to speak, mid-leadership race. We saw that through our extensive coverage of the United Conservative leadership race, and we've seen it from time to time in this NDP leadership race. Of course, as you know, if you visited our YouTube or podcast archives, you can check out our interviews with each of the candidates seeking that leadership. They want to lead the official opposition now, but obviously they want to be Alberta's next premier. How far will MLA Shepherd's endorsement go? We'll find out. We've put it to a Twitter poll, and I'm going to release the results of that as we welcome David to the program in just a second. We asked you just about an hour before we went live this morning, who do you think he's going to endorse? And an interesting development. We'll see how well our Twitter followers have their finger on the pulse. Before we talk politics and then wildfires in Western Canada after that, yeah, it's a jam-packed episode today. I want to let you know that insurance agents across the province right now are earning great salaries. They're enjoying rewarding careers, and a lot of them are doing it without university degrees. If you've always felt like a lack of post-secondary education was the number one barrier standing in your way of launching a new career, don't worry about it. You can check out businesscareercollege.com. They're going to help you take that approved course, pass your licensing exam. That's what they're the best in the business at. Business Career College offers industry-leading approved courses in life insurance, property and casualty insurance. Plus, they've got expert instructors passionate about helping you launch your new career. Right now, a great incentive for Real Talkers, because you're hearing about this here on the show. You can save 15% on any insurance course with the code REALTALK. That's all one word, REALTALK, when you get started today at businesscareercollege.com. NDP MLA out of Edmonton-Centre, David Shepherd, joining us in studio. It's nice to see you. Thanks for making time for us today.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. It's great to be here.
Well, as soon as we heard that you were going to be endorsing a candidate for leadership, everybody went, "Ooh, I wonder who this is going to be," because you're a high-profile MLA. You've been around for a while. Obviously, I think that your word carries when it comes to politics in central and northern Alberta and within the Alberta NDP as well. Should we get to the Twitter poll first? This is unscientific.
Let's see what the people think.
This is unofficial. Put this out about an hour ago. Got about 250 votes right now. We say you're going to endorse a candidate live on Real Talk. Who do people think it's going to be? A quarter of our respondents, 25% of them, think it's going to be your colleague out of Edmonton, Sarah Hoffman. About 7% think that you're going to endorse Kathleen Ganley. 2% think it's going to either be Gil McGowan or Jody Calhoun-Stonehouse. That's the other option, but almost exactly 2 out of 3. 66% of our respondents believe that you're showing up here on Real Talk to endorse Naheed Nenshi as the next leader of the Alberta NDP. So who's right?
I think it seems like folks have a pretty good pulse on where things are at. I am here this morning to say I am supporting Naheed Nenshi as the next leader of the Alberta NDP and the next premier of Alberta.
Wow. What led you to this point?
So, I first spoke with Naheed probably about 3 weeks after I sort of made my own announcement that I was not going to be putting my name forward in the leadership race. So we had a chance to talk probably for about an hour or so, and if you ask him, he'll tell you I grilled him hard. I was skeptical. I had a lot of questions for someone coming from outside the party who was looking to lead the party, and sort of asking about his history, his intentions, and sort of what was bringing him here. And, I'll be honest, it was a really incredibly genuine and thoughtful conversation. It was very clear that Naheed had done his homework. He was giving it very careful thought. And in that conversation, I really felt that for myself individually, I was really respected and heard, and he was genuinely interested in my thoughts. So that kind of sparked it there. So I still took a lot of time to think it over. I watched his campaign launch. I watched his initial interviews. And certainly, I have a lot of respect for Naheed as a communicator. And I think a lot of the challenges we face, a lot of the battles that we're going to be facing in our work as opposition and towards the next election are going to be a communications battle. Danielle Smith is incredibly gifted communicator. I don't agree with her policies. I don't agree with a lot of how she uses the skills she has, but she has them. And what I've seen in Naheed is an incredible ability to counter that. And I think that's important and essential. And in the vision that he put forward, I heard a lot of the same messages that I had wanted to bring forward if I'd had the chance to run that campaign. The fact that this is a government, I hear it from folks every day, that does not represent the values of most Albertans. But in fact, we in the Alberta NDP, we are the party that represents Albertans' values, and we need to tell that story. And what we need is a leader who can tell that story, who can bring people together across political viewpoints, putting aside partisanship, bringing people together to get things done, to tackle the tough issues that we face. And I've seen Naheed able to do that. So I sat down and had a number of conversations with people who've known him, people who've been friends with him for a number of years, and I asked them those questions too, about his intentions, his integrity, and what they saw. I saw the endorsements that he got from his former colleagues in Calgary City Council. The fact that people from either end of the ideological spectrum, Councillor Drew Farrell on the left, Jeremy Farkas on the right, all said, this is a man who knows how to lead, how to bring people together, how to build a team, a man of unimpeachable integrity, Jeremy Farkas said. That resonated with me. So I had a few more conversations, and I saw the incredible momentum that Naheed's been able to build. The rooms he can fill. That's excitement that we need. That is bringing hope to Albertans. And that's why I'm proud to endorse Naheed Nenshi for leadership of the Alberta NDP.
You've been colleagues with Sarah Hoffman and Kathleen Ganley for quite some time. Obviously, yours and Sarah's ridings butt up against each other. It doesn't get any tighter than that. Is this the type of thing where you notify them ahead of time, or are Ms. Hoffman and Ms. Ganley hearing about this right now in Real Talk?
So, politics is strategic. So I'll be honest, this is the first that anyone outside of, I think some very close circles are hearing my endorsement.
How do you think this is going to land with your colleagues at the legislature?
I hope it lands well. I think we certainly recognize that we all have enormous respect for each other. We have an incredibly talented team, and having been in the position of, working myself to try to stand up a campaign for the leadership, I know how much work and effort it is. And let me just say, I have enormous respect for everyone who's put their name forward. I've seen how hard Sarah and Kathleen have been working in this race, Jyoti and Gil getting in as well. I saw how hard Rocky was working, with her campaign in the months preceding, and certainly during the weeks that she was in. So ultimately what this comes down to, is each of us have to make that decision about what we see as the best opportunity and future and vision for our party. And whatever the result, I think we are all going to be able to come together to get that job done.
For people that haven't been paying the closest attention, Raki Pancholi, one of the first to announce her candidacy and withdrew from the race just a number of days ago, instead putting her support behind Naheed Nenshi. Quickly, were you surprised at that?
Well, certainly I had seen how hard Raki had been working on her campaign. I had incredible respect for the quality of campaign she put forward, some amazing policy that she had proposed, and some real momentum that was building. So certainly I have enormous respect for what much have been an incredibly difficult decision for her. But I respect that she chose to make it and has chosen to put that momentum behind Naheed.
It feels like the writing's on the wall, like to call a spade a spade. It feels like everybody knows how this is going to turn out. I know Hoffman's not going to love me saying that. Ganley's not going to love me saying that. McGowan sure didn't love me saying it the other day. Do you get that same sense?
Certainly, I'm seeing some incredible momentum behind Naheed. The rally he had here in Edmonton, those early membership numbers. Certainly, even the volunteer training sessions, right, where he's pulling over 500 people in a room. That certainly speaks to a pretty tough force to beat. But certainly, the race is far from over. We have until June 22nd. I wouldn't be making this endorsement if I didn't think it didn't matter. And we've certainly got until April 22nd for a lot more people to buy memberships.
I can't think of anybody in the province of Alberta that would be likely to run that would get Naheed a run for his money. In other words, I can't see somebody else making a splash that would be bigger than his into the race. And I'm not sure, aside from major scandal erupting that nobody saw through a vetting process, unlikely as well, I can't see the other candidates gaining ground. And I say that respectfully to them. They're running great campaigns and they're committed at what they do. There's been a lot of talk about the establishment, about kind of the old guard, that kind of idea, the whatever you want to call it, people call it the progressive purity test, the NDP membership having their chosen ones, so to speak. And some interesting comments on my tweet this morning when I asked, who do people think you're going to endorse? And Dwayna says, well, I think Sarah Hoffman, but probably Nenshi if David wants to stay relevant in the party. That's kind of an interesting angle on that. John says, well, David's part of the NDP establishment. Would he really endorse Nenshi? We'll find out. Well, John, we've found out. Give us some insight into that. I mean, I guess it can happen in any party, but you get that sense, a real strong sense within the Alberta NDP that a lot of those longtime members really want to see somebody win that's, paid their dues.
Well, Ryan, I'm flattered that people would consider me part of the NDP establishment because, to be clear, when I stepped up to run from 2015, I came from outside the party. I bought my membership in September 2014 to support Rachel in her leadership bid. I was invited to a coffee party by friends. I'd never been a member of a political party up until then. So when I stepped up to run in 2015, it wasn't even with an expectation of winning. I mean, I was running against an 18-year incumbent.
I'll remind people, Liberal Lori Blakeman.
Absolutely. She'd held this seat for 18 years. I got caught up in the orange wave. So, I mean, I've had now almost 9 years as an MLA with the Alberta NDP. But remember, I came in from outside. So I guess that says a lot, that people think I have had that opportunity and I've contributed that much value to the party. And that's what I would say then. We need to continue to have that kind of an open mind. Someone like Naheed brings in an incredible level of talent, integrity, a level of experience and maturity and wisdom from having spent 3 years leading one of the biggest cities in Alberta.
Yeah, I want to ask you about that. I mean, you're riding downtown Edmonton. It's where we're broadcasting from right now, but it's no secret that downtown Edmonton has seen its struggles in many different contexts. What do you see out of Nenshi, a Calgary-based candidate? Now, I'm not dumbing this commentary down to, the candidate's got to be from Calgary or the candidate's got to be from Edmonton, but you're an Edmonton guy representing Edmonton constituents. He's from Calgary. Talk to me what went into that thought.
Well, what I can say is that, Naheed is someone who understands the needs of municipalities and the challenges they have working with the provincial government. So he was there, I think, during the time with Jason Kenney when we saw the beginning of this incredible antagonism and condescension between the provincial government and, our municipalities across the province. We're certainly seeing that on steroids now with Danielle Smith as she looks to force through all kinds of policies that municipalities don't want, a provincial police force, municipal political parties, the incredibly insulting, attitude that they're holding towards the city of Edmonton. So I think someone like Naheed, he has an incredible ability to work with municipalities across the province, certainly our major cities, Edmonton and Calgary. He understands the challenges they face, the need for an actual supportive provincial government that provides the funding and collaboration that they need, but also some of our smaller municipalities, our mid-sized cities, and even some of the rural areas. And so I feel that he is someone I can talk to who understands. When we talk, he listens. He brings genuine ideas and solutions to the table, and he's willing to hear mine. So we have some real tough challenges that we need to address here. And what that's going to take is real collaboration across levels of government, municipal, provincial, federal. That is not what we're getting with Danielle Smith and the UCP. But I think it's certainly what we have aimed for with the Alberta NDP, and I think it's what Naheed would bring to the table.
I want to drop into our YouTube live chat right as we went on. James chimes in. He says, I'll put my money down. D. Shep will not be endorsing Nenshi. And about 15 comments later, James says, wow, I'm out some imaginary money. He says, I'm pleased but very surprised. Tony is referencing you as the king of the bow ties, says we need more people like David in politics. That's a real compliment. Nice to hear, I'm sure, which tees up nicely a question I want to ask you in just 1 minute's time. That was a Twitter thread you put out, a real personal one, talking about your health, talking about your own leadership aspirations. You told Albertans that it has been your intention to run. It has been your intention to seek the leadership, but you decided against. In just a minute, we're going to ask David Shepherd why and what's up, and how does that impact his own political career moving forward, if at all. More from the MLA from Edmonton-Centre in just a quick second. This conversation is made possible with the support of our friends at Friesen Brothers, who have one message and one message only this week, and that is their West Edmonton location. The brand new Friesen Brothers Glenora is opening on April 12th. This is now me talking personally. This is Ryan's promise. They should brand that, Johnny. Ryan's promise. We could get like stickers made. It could go on certain different grocery items. For me, it would be the sourdough cinnamon buns. No brainer. My promise to you is that this store will blow your freaking mind. If you're into meats and Alberta proteins, their butcher shop is second to none. If you're into the fresh sourdough sandwiches, oh, baby. And if you're into just hanging out, letting a Red Seal chef do the cooking for you, maybe sitting by a fireplace, sipping on a glass of wine, letting somebody else look after your dinner, the Friesen Brothers Kitchen is right up your alley. April 12th, Friesen Brothers Glenora opens its doors. If you're looking to declutter and get organized this year, our friends at California Closets are ready for that free consultation. They'd love to put their team of designers in touch with you, talk about ideas, talk about budgets, talk about timelines, whether it's converting a home office into a guest room or vice versa, whether it's getting your laundry room in order. Maybe you've always wanted one of those beautiful Murphy beds. Maybe your laundry room is just so disorganized and out of control, you don't even know where the ironing board is anymore. These are the daily problems that they solve for people, and their installers do a job. I mean, honestly, the value of your home and the value of your time spent in there, you're going to see a huge improvement when you work with California Closets. It all starts with a consult at californiaclosets.ca. And if you're the one in your family in charge of feeding the dogs and cats, we want to make sure that Grand Dog Essentials is on your radar. This is a proud family-owned business offering door-to-door delivery in Metro Calgary and Edmonton area, Central Alberta as well. Check out their blog link for really great information and insights into transitioning your dog or cat to a raw food diet. Plus, you can check out the supplements they have on offer. We've used them with our dogs for joint pain issues, for anxiety issues, and they work. We're proud to partner with the team at granddog.ca. David Shepherd is the MLA for Edmonton-Centre. He's just live on this show endorsed. Naheed Nenshi is the next leader of the Alberta NDP. David, you tweeted back the second week of February. You said since the election last year, you've had a lot of people across communities and political circles reach out to encourage you to pursue the leadership of the Alberta NDP. You said in recent months, as it became clear that a race was coming, you had many ask if you would be in it. You go on to say that you had intended to seek the leadership, but decided against based on your health. I understand this is a personal issue, but what are you able to tell us about your health right now, how that factored into the decision, and what it means for your political career moving forward?
Absolutely. You know, folks that know me know I've been living with some chronic health issues for quite some time, some for, close to a couple of decades. I live with severe food intolerance. I have multiple chemical sensitivities. And these are things, honestly, that, can make it really challenging to navigate the world at times. But, the analogy I use is kind of, I come from a music background. So, if you're a self-taught musician, often you'll learn how to play an instrument. You can get very good at it. You develop your style, your technique. But when you're self-taught, sometimes you teach yourself some things that are not helpful. So maybe you got a fingering technique or something that actually over time, it starts to do damage. Maybe you start to build up carpal tunnel. You have to stop sometimes and do a reset and relearn how to play so that you're not hurting yourself more. And for myself, I developed a lot of different mechanisms that allowed me to function at a pretty high level, allowed me to do this work that I really love to do. And one of the things that I really loved about this is that opportunity to serve in leadership, to work with folks. The work I've done with Black communities across this province to increase representation and try to encourage more engagement from African, Black, and Caribbean communities. And yeah, I was very much wanting to go after this opportunity. I had a lot of encouragement, a lot of support. I'd lined up fundraising. I had the machine queued up and ready to go. Unfortunately, the pressures of putting that kind of a campaign together are huge. And I've been struggling over the last year with some of the health issues and just trying to do what I'd always done, is just push harder and power through. And I just came to realize in early February that unfortunately the reserves were tapped and the strength was not there. And if I had tried to push through further, I think I could have done myself some serious harm. So I made a very difficult decision that I needed to step back and not pursue the leadership race.
Are you confident that you can continue to bring to the table what you need to bring to the table to be an effective MLA and an opposition critic should the opportunity present itself again for the voters and the constituents in Edmonton-Centre?
I absolutely am. You know, like I said, I took some time away. I unplugged, got right off social media, took time away from everything, spent some time with my family doctor, have a much better understanding, I think, of what underlies a lot of the conditions I'm dealing with, what kind of ties it all together. Pursued some new treatment, and, I feel that I am coming back stronger and smarter and in a much better position, of understanding myself and having those systems in place to support me in this work.
I talked to a lot of politicians. I talked to even more staffers, political staffers, and I've had more than one. As a matter of fact, I've had several tell me that they keep their bosses, they keep you politicians off social media entirely. How has the game changed? You face your fair share of vitriol, I guess. I don't think well, whatever. It's not up to me. But I wouldn't put you in the top 10 of people in the crosshairs in this province.
I don't get anywhere near the level of attack that, a number of my colleagues get. Particularly, women in politics really do get the worst of it, and racialized women, as I think we're seeing with Mayor Gondek in Calgary, right?
Dude.
So, I get I'll be honest, very small amounts of that vitriol. But really what it comes down to, Ryan, is that, working in politics, it's a job that will take everything you give it and keep on taking. The only real regulator in this work is yourself.
Yeah.
So I've had to learn when to step back, how to sort of better. The opportunities I had, serving as health critic in the midst of a pandemic, during the war on doctors, the opportunities I've had to stand up for my communities here in Edmonton City Centre, I think during some very difficult times, the work I've done with Black communities across the province, I'm very proud of that. But at the same time, it can be easy for those things to slip into an unhealthy level of obsession. And it was good for me to step back and sort of clear my head and get a better understanding of how I can do this work effectively, but in a healthy way.
Yeah, well said. Jeremy Farkas, by the way, is watching right now on YouTube. The former Calgary councillor candidate for mayor down there says, thanks, David, for supporting us municipalities on the EMS dispatch issue. The switch to centralization was very ill thought out. You have served as the opposition critic for health, so that's kind of, I guess, your wheelhouse or what you've been paying the closest attention to. But you opened this interview talking about Nenshi's potential, an existing skill set that will serve him well in the thrust and parry of politics. I do think that a debate between Naheed Nenshi and Danielle Smith would be one worth watching. I'll be in the front row for that one. But you talked about Albertans' values and how you don't think that this government, the United Conservative government, is reflecting Albertans' values. You think that your party does or can under Naheed Nenshi. What are those values we're talking about?
Well, when you look at any kind of polling, really, and sort of ask people where they find themselves on the political spectrum in Alberta, a lot of folks will reflexively say they're conservative. But when you actually get down to core issues, and even their values, do you think that we can get more done if we work together, or do we get more done if we pursue a more individualistic approach? People fall center and center left. That is where Albertans are. Albertans believe in investing in our public services. They believe in building a province where everybody has that equal opportunity. They believe in looking after our neighbors. What we see, for example, right here in my constituency, Edmonton downtown, we see from Danielle Smith in the UCP, when we're talking about folks who are living without housing, who are living with substance use and struggling on a number of fronts, what we're hearing is a lot of very politicized language, a lot of hyperbole, hyperbole around crime and justice. But that's not what I hear from my constituents. When they reach out, they tell me they want to see support for the people who are struggling. They want it to be compassionate, and they want it to be reasonable. They want to see government invest in things like housing. So what we are seeing from the UCP, it's quite clear this is not where Albertans are. Indeed, they're pursuing so many policies that Albertans don't want. An Alberta pension plan, an Alberta police force, forcing in municipal policies, the tearing apart of the healthcare system. This is a government that simply does not listen. They're interested in picking fights. So the only thing that they seem to maybe pick up is anger. But Albertans are so much more than that, so much richer, so much deeper. And I think we as a party have the opportunity. Now, we have to earn that trust. It's pretty clear in the last election, we didn't get there. Far too many people, when they looked at that ballot and said, do I trust the Alberta NDP or do I trust Danielle Smith and the UCP? They chose the UCP. So that's work that we've got to do. We've got over the next 3 years, we need to keep having those conversations in our communities. And let me tell you, I'm excited by the incredible colleagues I have to work with on that. We see them in the leadership race, folks like Sarah, Kathleen, Rocky, who was in that race, Jody, and other folks that are out there doing this work on the ground too. Heather Sweet with her incredible work with rural communities, some of the great candidates that we stood up in these rural constituencies. We can be out there having those conversations and earning those votes. And I truly believe that Naheed is someone who can lead us in that work and do that work himself.
It's not like you guys got blown out last election, though. I mean, it's kind of like I don't necessarily 100% appreciate this math where people say the Alberta NDP lost the government by 1,600 votes. If you look at the 300 you needed here and the 400 you needed here, which isn't really how politics works, but it is a perspective check. What is it, 10 out of 14? No, 14. Anyway, you greatly increased your MLAs in Calgary.
Absolutely.
You won Calgary by the numbers. There are reasons for optimism, but I think it was Seventh Pilot or somebody else in our live chat right now said, hey, and I believe that commenter to be conservative said, I think losing Rachel's really going to hurt them. It has been, I say this jokingly, but the cult of Notley, the Notley crew. I mean, it would be a big part about that was her brand. It was Rachel. It was respectfully the second generation NDP leader, the Grant Notley's daughter, the one that took you from 4 to 54 seats, the one that stopped the Tory dynasty. I mean, all this was like Rachel, right?
Yeah.
And so now you go, well, these are big shoes to fill. At the same time, though, I mean, she didn't get you there last election, so there's obviously room for improvement. Give us some real talk. I mean, I know everybody's being careful, everybody's being deferential and respectful because they would, and she's had a lot of time in public service. But what does the next leader need to do that Rachel Notley didn't?
So, I came in under Rachel Notley. Like I said, I bought my party membership to support Rachel, in the leadership race. She was my premier. She has been the leader of the party for as long as I've been an MLA, and she has done incredible work to build us to where we are today. She raised the floor for the Alberta NDP. She made this a two-party province. So I have enormous respect for what Rachel has done and what Rachel has built. But one other part of what's been built under Rachel Notley is an incredible team of MLAs. And I think we saw that over the last 4 years, one of the most formidable oppositions this province has ever had. And that has been magnified now with an incredible slate of candidates that were inspired by Rachel to run in the last election and form now a caucus of 38. So we have an incredible legacy that Rachel has built and that she leaves behind. And the fact that we have such a dynamic slate of leadership candidates, including folks that like Naheed that are coming in from outside that are inspired by that legacy that Rachel has built and the possibilities of what we can do with it, that speaks to, the vision that she had and how she followed through on it. So what do we need to do now? Well, like I said, it's that next step. We don't necessarily get another chance like we had last year. Obviously there was, we were very clear about the failings of Danielle Smith, and she's followed through and demonstrated pretty much every single one of them since she's moved on as premier. But the fact is, what we need is to be able to tell our story clearly, concisely to every single Albertan. That we are the party that represents their values. That we are a party that they can trust to govern fairly, with intelligence and competence, and that we can truly understand and reflect what they need in their communities. That's the work we're doing now, and I think that's the work we can scale up incredibly under the leadership of Naheed.
When you talk to us about Danielle Smith's performance as premier, you say she's proving herself to be whatever. What would you say, as we wrap here, what are like the top three things that you would be critical of premier for, of her government, on the record? What are the three things off the top of your head where you say she didn't say she was going to do this, or she doesn't have a mandate to do this? What are the top three?
Well, I'd say the first one would be her incredible level of dishonesty. And that is demonstrated by her pursuit of policies that she did not campaign on, or that she in fact said that she would not pursue, but also reflected by the fact that they continually are trying to hide the truth. Just yesterday, their announcement, right, about Recovery Alberta, and they threw out a whole bunch of statistics to try to make things look like things were improving in terms of drug poisonings in the province, but hid the biggest truth that drug poisonings, according to the metrics they used, have increased by 148%. Drug poisoning deaths in this province. That was nowhere to be seen. They're doing this in healthcare. They're doing this across the board. They're hiding information. They're under investigation for manipulating the freedom of information system. So that's one of the biggest things there. Secondly, she refuses to actually listen to what Albertans want and what Albertans need. Thirdly, just her focus on creating division, fighting with municipalities, fighting with the federal government. On every front, this is a government, back in December when I was talking about the healthcare system, I said they are building Fortress Smith. They're on the inside and everybody else is out. And that's exactly what we're seeing. And that is not what we need in Alberta if we are going to move ahead, if we're going to grow our economy, if we're going to build our public services, if we are truly going to make this a province where everybody can live and thrive. That requires collaboration, openness, and transparency. And we are not getting that from Danielle Smith and the UCP.
David Shepherd, the MLA for Edmonton City Centre. If you're just joining us on the Mixlr audio app presented by California Closets, endorsing Naheed Nenshi, former Calgary mayor, as the next leader of his party, the Alberta NDP. We'll see how this plays out. Feels like we know, but hey, people that sort of set things in stone before the vote goes down have oftentimes been proven to be premature.
Yes.
And so we'll keep our powder dry before we start that commentary and speculate beyond, what is it, June 22nd?
June 22nd.
That's right. All right, Shep, thanks for doing this, man. It's always good to see you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you got it. That's David Shepherd. Let us know what you think to talk@ryanjesperson.com. David mentioned what Calgary Mayor Jyoti Gondek's up against right now. I want to get to your comments on that in just a second. We talked about it yesterday. Check this out. Right now, we want to remind you, if you are a skilled tradesperson, if you've got your ticket as an electrician or you're an apprentice and you're looking for work right now, Kubi Energy wants to add to their team. They need to add to their team right now because they've got more and more jobs coming in BC, Alberta, and beyond. This company is one of the fastest growing solar installers in the entire country. Why? Well, if I had to guess, part of it has to be because people are paying more and more and more and more and more and more for power, for natural gas. It starts to make sense, especially on those electricity bills, to start looking at alternative forms of energy, green energy, sustainable solutions, and that's what Kubi's all about. They're also hiring office managers, sales personnel, you name it. Check out the careers link today at kubienergy.ca. Now you're going, okay, yeah, we appreciate these job announcements on Real Talk. How cool is it to have a show that just time and time again announces who's hiring at times of unemployment? We love that. But you go, I got some work to do first. I got to school up. I got to level up my qualifications, my skills, my understanding of the world around me. Athabasca University is ready for you as Canada's open university. World-class accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education whenever and wherever it works for you. How about this? More than 94% of AU alumni polled say they're satisfied with the quality of their education. If you're like me, you've got more than one friend that'll tell you they felt like their post-secondary experience was a waste of time because it wasn't a good fit, or they weren't able to attend, or they were always behind. It's not with AU. All of these objections are answered. You can learn more about the AU Advantage by checking out athabascau.ca. And if you're one of those in the central or northern Alberta region looking to really bring your outdoor space to life, it could be the front of your business, it could be your front or backyard in your home. Maybe it's a brand new build. Maybe it's a house you've lived in for 30 years that needs a refresh. Eden Landscaping has been doing this, bringing outdoor spaces to life for more than 20 years. A wide variety of designs, ultra-modern, natural. They're experts in stunning stonework. We had them do a beautiful brick inlay in our backyard just a short time ago, just last summer. I'm going to be showing you photos, videos this summer of the finished product. Absolutely beautiful. And they worked with our budget. We're not a rich family, but we have expensive taste, John. And they were able to ride that line for us to find beautiful materials to complete that project for us, but also come in on our modest budget. And so that's why we give 2 thumbs up to Eden Landscaping at landscapeedmonton.ca.
Your backyard's a spot this summer.
Yeah, man.
I'm gonna be there.
I can't wait to have you over there. I keep talking about these Japanese lilacs. I told Mike with Eden Landscaping, I said we got to find a way to get lilacs in, because there's something about lilacs that are just unreal. Alberta Girl in the chat says losing Rachel Notley is going to be the only way for the NDP to build trust in rural ridings. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of split on that. I mean, I know that Rachel obviously owned, or had no choice, that Bill 6, that Farm Worker Safety Act. That was one of the big things. I mean, we're going back to 2015, 2016 here. Can you believe that was 8 years ago? But obviously that hurt the party in a big way. It hurt that government, the Notley government, in a big way. But Rachel also grew up in a rural area. They put her out riding on horses during the campaign and stuff like that. So I don't know if there's a candidate that has more rural cred now than Rachel Notley did, but I'll take your point, Alberta Girl, who goes on, by the way, to say the UCP is pursuing their ideologies based on independence, and the majority of Albertans do not want independence from Canada, which is an interesting point. Kimberly says, I get so tired of calling the NDP campaign an attack campaign while letting the UCP slide. There wasn't a single ad that the UCP had that was not fear-mongering if Rachel Notley won. I'm not trying to sort of both sides this, but let's be honest, during campaigns, everybody's using the fear factor these days because it's what it works. Yeah. When was the last, I'm going to say Barack Obama is my answer before I even ask the question, but when was the last political campaign that you saw that was like absolutely 100% positive?
That's what I was just thinking as you were saying that. I mean, the tagline was hope, and now the tagline is, well, we're talking about this. It's who throws the biggest bombs. Yeah. But like we've seen now, and like David was talking about, once you get in power, everything flips the other way. And now the UCP is on their heels, and we'll have to see what happens. But David coming on here and endorsing Nenshi. I mean, a lot of people didn't think that was going to happen in the chat today.
No, I didn't think it was going to happen.
Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess just because I thought that, and maybe like I don't live inside David's head, so I don't know where his thought process is. I do think that there's some element of, I don't know, say political survival here, but you're seeing, Rocky Pancholi, another example of experienced elected officials that believe they know exactly who's going to win, and they want to set themselves up well for the post-win reality. Right. So, that there's that angle to it. But I think that the Hoffman-Edmonton connection, I think that the establishment connection. But David makes an interesting and compelling point as well. When he came in and beat Laurie Blakeman, that was and that was also a unique situation, too, because Laurie Blakeman was not necessarily perceived to be part of the problem, so to speak, with that Jim Prentice PC government that everybody, I guess, finally decided was too entitled and needed to be spanked. And they were. But Laurie Blakeman was, if you look back, I mean, she, as a Liberal MLA, and there weren't a ton of them, had introduced a private members bill that kind of paved the way for gay-straight alliances in Alberta. And a big part of the reason that Jim Prentice was facing a lot of fire was because that party was his party. The government was refusing to get behind Blakeman's private members bill. So Laurie was, I think, popular in her riding. As David mentioned, she was the incumbent for 18 years, which is a hell of a thing.
That's a big run.
But yeah, David knocked her off. And I think a lot of people were kind of like, wow, they took note of that one, because it wasn't that same storyline. Yeah. That we saw in 2015, which was that so-called orange crush, where a lot of PCers, a lot of progressive conservatives lost their jobs. It wasn't the same situation.
And I know David and Rocky have both kind of, got behind Nenshi, but both of them very capable people, very knowledgeable, very intelligent, very well-spoken. I could see both of them being leaders. So even with the health problems David says that he addressed today on the show, I think both of them, you're going to see a lot more from them in the future.
Kim says, I think looking at the last election, the NDP lost in the debate and not in the ads.
100%.
Says, in my opinion, Kim, well, I don't know if they won or lost in the ads, but you're 100% right that they lost the debate. There's no doubt about that. And, I'm not, sitting here kicking rocks at Rachel Notley. I mean, what's done is done. But you remember there was that one moment, we played the clip many times. There was that one moment where Danielle Smith kind of overcommitted verbally to something,
and she didn't call her.
And Notley said, "Do you really want me to start listing off?" I'm paraphrasing. "Do you really want me to start listing off the problems with your candidate?"
Yes.
And everybody went, "Yes." No, like yes, 100%. You
That's
can't.
what a
You know,
debate
you can't in talk shows and political debates. You can't imply things. If you want to be truly effective, you got to spell
100%.
them out.
Also,
you know?
it's very hard to find a nice orange pantsuit.
Yeah, fair enough. They were both wearing blue. Good reference. Good reference, John. A lot of people believe that Notley was rocking blue in that debate because she wanted to convince people that she could come across as a progressive, well, I don't know if I say progressive conservative, but you know what I'm saying, middle of the road. Justin says, I think David would have stood a solid chance of winning the leadership if he had run. I like David a lot personally.
100%.
He's just a wonderful guy. I think that anybody that entered this race would get absolutely smoked by Nenshi, no offense. And so maybe part of that was that. I mean, and also, by the way, is this worth me telling the audience? I think you guys should know. We did reach out to David's team ahead of time, and I said, we don't. It's not typically standard practice to tell political staffers or support staff or interviewees themselves what we're going to ask. But we did. I did fly by and say, hey, I want to ask him about his health. I want to ask him about that tweet.
Sure.
Just because I do recognize that's a personal thing, and it's kind of weird to ask someone about their health in a context other than a wellness check. But I do think it's relevant.
Yeah.
Like people are going, well, if he's my MLA, can he still do the job? And I appreciated him being really candid.
Well, it seems like it was a big part of him not staying in the race, as well as knowing that Nenshi's numbers are up and all of that. But yeah, if the stress of being a politician when you're healthy is enough, but when you're not at your top health, I can see how he would take that into consideration.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, we got a lot of great comments in the live chat. Really appreciate this. Garth is talking about Alberta energy.
Party on,
Garth. Yeah, party on, Wayne. And Garth is going on basically saying the next leader of this party needs to figure out where they stand on Alberta energy and stick to it. Separate from the federal NDP, remove the party from the grips of the unions and far-left utopianism. Garth, I don't disagree with a single thing you said. Let me get to this. Before we talk, I'm excited to connect with Trina Moyles in just a second. She's the journalist that is she's put together the cover story in the newest issue of Alberta Views magazine, Alberta is Burning. What are we going to do about it? Now, Trina is a journalist. She's the author of a couple of books on this subject matter. But here's the thing. She was also, she staffed a wildfire lookout tower for a long time. So she comes at this honestly and from a couple of different angles. So we're going to be talking about wildfire season in just a second with Trina Moyles, who will be joining us. But I wanted to circle back on our interview yesterday.
Yeah.
Charles Adler joins us, the first episode of every week, and we talked about Calgary's Mayor Jyoti Gondek getting booed at the Calgary Flames South Asian celebration game. So she's introduced as, it's obviously implied that that's her cultural and ethnic heritage, and then she's introduced as the first ever female mayor of Calgary, and then the boo birds just like go to town, and there's, I don't know, thousands of people that are just giving her the gears and heckling her as she makes her way out. And so Chuck and I talked about this yesterday. If you want to hear his full take on this, you can check out that episode. That's the April 2nd episode of Real Talk. So I tweeted about it, and I wanted to touch down on this because it's, the tweet's got 230 replies or something, and none of them are gracious. Yeah. It's pretty wild. But I tweeted, boo all you want, I guess. But it gives off a Bush League vibe when boo birds chirp during a cultural celebration, and even more so when Gondek's being recognized as Calgary's first ever female mayor. I said there's wild things going down in Calgary. She was damned if she did or didn't participate. Now, I didn't say I think Jyoti Gondek's doing a great job. I didn't say that people don't have reason to be critical of her. I didn't say that Calgary's council is in swell shape or that any council is in swell shape in the province of Alberta, for that matter. I just said that I think it gives off a bit of a Bush League vibe to boo during a cultural celebration. Well, I mean, these comments here on this tweet, Duncan says a hockey game's a cultural celebration. Maybe in Edmonton, he says, I guess that's why they go so they can drink. I remind Duncan, because I like to help, that it was South Asian celebration game for the Calgary Flames. Jim Rivet, who's not wrong, says politicians go to these big events thinking it'll help their popularity. Sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. He says, remember, this is the mayor who chose to opt out of the annual menorah lighting at City Hall. Maybe she should have opted out of the Flames presentation. situation. Michael says to me, imagine being so soft that you're sobbing about your BFF being booed.
BFF?
I don't know if I was sobbing, but Sotek says hockey nationalism will rescue this country. Monk A says, from the people who don't know what a woman is, going to drag that into this debate. Celebrate her for being female. Says she's Canadian. But yeah, I guess celebrate her heritage, never your own. Okay. Alfredo says, this conservative campaign against Jyoti Gondek is intended not only to damage her politically, but also to create a chilling effect on other progressive candidates, especially women, so they won't run. I think that Alfredo's onto something there. If you look at the noise, if you look at the anger coming out of Calgary right now, it is really something else. Mary says the Calgary booing was entirely out of line. Says that those who booed have indecent, insensitive, undisciplined voices. DM says booing is the opposite of clapping. What's Bush League is the faux outrage over it. Canadian Space Force says, so says the dude who got fired from radio for racist remarks. Can we put that to bed? That's not a thing. That's not true. Jeff Tetz says the commissioner of every major sport gets booed all the time. How is this an issue? I wouldn't boo. I think it's disrespectful, but hardly a new phenomenon. I mean, Jeff, she's not the commissioner, and she's there on South Asian Celebration Night. And anyway, Rafoso Bill says lots of misogyny there. H-Boy says this is everything wrong with society today. Carter says, oh, yeah, the race and gender card. Nothing to do with her having the lowest approval rating of any mayor in the history of Calgary, right, Ryan? Brock says, I would agree if she didn't ignore her constituents, full stop. Says this recall is going to open a lot of eyes. People will try to brush it off as nothing. But it's going to be telling to what lengths people will go to en masse to show that she just needs to go. Others go on. I mean, I was called a cock and a beta male.
Oh.
A lot of beta male comments here. Right?
Jeez,
Boz says progressives only become vocal with this kind of stuff when it's their team on the receiving end. If it's a conservative, they cheer it on. Others say aging rec league athlete says great handle says she's an awful mayor, rightly booed for all she's done since being elected. Definitely a step back for our city, and the citizens are letting her know it. A lot of people, going on saying, I would have booed louder. Some of you saying the Black Tuesday that I'm a virtue signaling weak man. Okay.
I would say, as a guy who has been in sports production for over a decade, that was a miss and a fail to not put a music bed under her entrance. Because you do have all this stuff going on with the recall. You know that popularity for her isn't at its best right now, to say the least. It would have served them well to just put a music bed underneath very lightly. That would have probably dulled out most of the boos. And then if they got louder, just raise it a bit. That's what you usually do when you introduce someone. I have no idea why they just introduced her with silence so that you could hear all the booing. It was a miss there, and I'm not putting it on one production guy or the Flames DJ, but actually their production director now is the former Edmonton Elks director.
But let me ask you this: so that's an interesting production insight from you.
Yeah.
But let me ask you,
it's just a safety, right?
But let me ask you, if you were a political staffer, because there's two approaches to this.
Like who works for Gondek.
If you're if you're her chief of staff or a senior advisor in the mayor's office, and they say the Calgary Flames want you to participate in this South Asian celebration, and you're a woman whose cultural heritage aligns there, it makes sense for you to participate. You're mayor of Calgary.
Sure.
The Flames are the biggest brand in Calgary by a mile, like every other Canadian NHL franchise. You've have somewhat of an embattled relationship with the club, but you've reached an agreement. You've put, the photos have been snapped. You've got an arena deal coming, good deal or not. There's one of two choices: either face the music, so to speak, I guess with some defiance, and you want to show some confidence, show up, walk that carpet, go out for the ceremonial puck drop, probably expect some chirps, probably expect some boos, but hope that your presence will land and be effective.
Sure.
Or decline the invitation.
Yeah.
What do you advise her to do if you're in that position? I mean, hindsight's 2020. It's easy now to look back, but what do you think you would have told her at the time?
I mean, for this night, I would have said, let's do it. South Asian night, yes. If it was a random hockey game or the start of the playoffs, maybe not. People are a little rowdier. There's no connection to your heritage. But for this one, I think she was right to do it because you have a 50, I think it was a 50-50 roll of the dice. Like, hey, it's a great night celebrating my culture that I'm connected to. Maybe they won't boo. But I'm just saying, to introduce her alone without a music bed, I mean, you could have introduced them in succession. Because there were 3 people who came out, right? 2 before her. You could have played a music bed, introduce 1, 2, then Gondek, raise it up if there are boos. This whole thing could have been salvaged for her. And that, again, could have fallen on the political staff.
Filmmaker Mariah Braun is in the chat. She says, Johnny, you're right. There's an easy production solution.
It would have been easy.
You got somebody else who knows what she's doing in production that's chiming in on this. But others are saying, hey, Johnny, why is it Flame's responsibility to protect her from the thoughts of her constituents?
But let's say this. This is Alberta. People show their opinions here, I would say, more than anywhere else in the country, save for Quebec. And if, let's say, Justin Trudeau was coming out to drop the puck at the start of the playoffs, 2 Canadian teams going head-to-head at round 1 or something.
Yeah.
That probably doesn't line up with how things are going.
There's people in here saying the Flames aren't even a real NHL team.
Justin Trudeau in Alberta is probably going to get some boos. You would not decline the offer if someone had reached out. Of course, you're going to have the Prime Minister there. Of course.
Do you think that the Prime Minister would go to drop the puck at a
probably
Flames
not.
game?
I'm just using
a
maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is just, But would you not have a music bag ready and just say, and here's the Prime Minister, and then just play something loud underneath? You know what I mean? Just cover up whatever's going to happen, whether it's cheers or boos or whatever. But I think in this situation, I don't think she should have opted out. This is part of her heritage, and I know Adler touched on this yesterday. I do think there is a problem when people can't take a minute and just say, hey, politics aside, no matter what's going on, this has nothing to do with politics. This is about celebrating a heritage and a community that is invested in this city, in Calgary. Can we just shut up for 30 seconds? You don't have to clap, but you don't have to boo.
Yeah, nondescript is the optimist in the chat, says maybe they were leaving room for people to cheer.
Maybe that was the assumption.
Yeah, this is kind of funny too. Some of you are saying like Sharon and Tony and others are talking about like all this talk about beta male. Like this is like a new phrase, like beta male. So this is it's obviously like the subservient or second best to the alpha male. Like Heresy here responds to my tweet and says, hopefully next time they bring cartons of eggs.
Oh, God.
Costa says, I hope it made her feel like a disgrace and a failure in life. And then there's Michael, who I just felt like, I guess Michael felt like there was kind of, there wasn't enough kind of homophobia in my thread. And so Michael wonders, Jespo, are you a top or a bottom? I can't tell from the post. This is like the new thing, right? Like the beta male. If you start saying things like, is this the type of society we want to be? Or is this how we want to treat women in politics? Or is this how we want to like litigate dissenting opinions? Or is this what we want to bring to the table? Is this how we want to present ourselves to our fellow Canadians, what have you? And you beta male. Like the opposite of this is like the alpha male, right? The alpha male that doesn't even cook his meat. Just fucking tells his girlfriend and his wife to bring that meat out on a platter and takes big, you know what I mean? Like the alpha male, like all the big alpha males booing Jyoti Gondek at the hockey game.
I don't even think it goes that far. I think these people who call people betas are in the minority, and I think it's little things like just because guys are becoming more sensitive to other people's needs these days that they have to call them betas. But hey, we love the hate comments because they bump up the algorithm.
We're pulling back the curtain
keep
and letting
doing
people know. So I see Heidi has commented in the chat. She says, wait, what? Trina Moyles is on the show? Yeah, she is. And we've had her just like sitting here waiting. Trina's like, when? Have they forgotten about me? No, we haven't. But we're talking about things as they happen. Trina Moyles, an expert on wildfire, coming up in just a quick second. But we want to head out. I mean, first things first, we're going to be talking about saving our forests. We're going to be talking about protecting our lands. So why don't we tee this up? This is a no-brainer. Every Wednesday, we head out to the mountains, to Jasper National Park, courtesy of our friends at Tourism Jasper. It's MyJasper Memories, and it's our pleasure to let you know that a big, high-profile tradition, an annual tradition, is about to go again. In Jasper National Park, it is the Jasper Canadian Rockies Half Marathon. This goes Saturday, April 27th. I love this. My next door neighbor, Chad, is training for this. Atta boy. Johnny, I feel like I'm getting healthier just watching Chad train.
I'm getting tired.
I'm very proud of him. The distances, and the best part about this is that there's something for everybody. The 5K, the 10K, of course, there's the half marathon, and then I love this part, the family fun run. We want to give a shout out to Rob Warren. We're showing Rob's video right now on YouTube. Rob participated in the Jasper Half. That's the Canadian Rockies Half Marathon in Jasper last year. So there's a whole bunch of options for you to lace up at one of the best and most fun races in the country. I mean, have your breath taken away in a couple of different contexts. But number one, the mountains. Views of some of Jasper's iconic ranges, a course that passes by a stunning series of lakes. You're barely going to notice how fast you're running, my friends. A great atmosphere, amazing prizes, and it kicks off the warmer season of adventures. I've seen this thing go down. The participants are diverse in their experience, in their age. Some of them have traveled across the country. Those people on those marathon tours, you know what I'm talking about? And others, they just love getting out in Jasper. They love having a reason to be out there. All of your entry packages include a short sleeve running shirt. You get an awesome finisher medal. There's awards for the top 3 in each 10-year age group. You get chip timing with live event updates so you can follow along, which is really neat. Great post-race snacks, eligibility for draw prizes. A charitable donation is included in your registration. Plus, they've got aid stations along the way to make sure that this all goes down seamlessly. You can register today at Jasper Canadian Rockies Half.ca or check out the show notes on the podcast or YouTube. MyJasper Memories is presented proudly every week on Real Talk by our friends at Tourism Jasper. And from that to this, Alberta is burning. Believe it or not, there's some wildfires that are still going on now. Our next guest will explain how that works. From last season, they never fully extinguished. They're underground. But the fact of the matter is, above ground, where we can all see it and smell it and feel it, breathe it, we're expecting and bracing for another horrendous wildfire season. It's the feature in the newest issue of Alberta Views magazine. Alberta's burning. What are we going to do about it? The author of that, a journalist. She's written the book Lookout, Love, Solitude, and Searching for Wildfire in the Boreal Forest, a memoir of her 7 years working as a fire tower lookout in northwestern Alberta. Trina Moyles is currently based in Whitehorse, Yukon, where she's working on her third book, Black Bear, about human-bear coexistence and conservation challenges in the province. She's making her Real Talk debut. It is so nice to have you here. Thanks for making time for us.
Thanks so much for having me on the show, Ryan.
What a cool job. A wildfire lookout, a tower. What do you call it? A resident. Don't you live up in those towers? Can you tell us how you got into that?
Yeah, well, I grew up in the Peace River country. My dad was a biologist, so he was often flying over these fire towers. At the time, there was 127 in the province when I started. Now there's only 100, but so I kind of grew up with the knowledge that this job still existed. A lot of people don't realize that there's still humans out there in the forest and the mountains, scouting for smoke. Lookouts are the first line of detection in terms of wildfire smoke in Alberta. So it's a pretty neat job, and I felt really privileged to be able to do it for 7 years amongst some really incredible people who are sort of called back to the profession year after year. It's really an incredible position.
Yeah, I would imagine, and we're going to talk a lot about the science of wildfires. Your piece in Alberta Views is amazing. I want to recommend everybody check it out, and obviously check out your book as well. But just on a personal side, the way my brain works, I'm curious to know it's a job that would come with a lot of isolation. You'd spend a lot of time in your own thoughts. You'd spend a lot of time processing what you're seeing and experiencing. How did your perspective on conservation evolve or change or grow through those 7 years that you were up on that lookout tower?
Yeah, it's really a unique vantage point into Alberta's forests. And so, I mean, you're witnessing not only, like the climate or the environment season to season, or, the intensity, or sometimes, sometimes there were really rainy, there you go. And sometimes there were really rainy fire seasons as well, where nothing happened. So it was pretty incredible to, yeah, to have those experiences year to year. And then you also, sort of gain insight into industry and the way that the forests are managed. Like you would see like logging operations, or the impact of oil and gas in the forest as well. You fly into your tower typically in right now a lot of the lookouts are getting ready to head out because it has been such a drought year and such a low snowpack over the winter. And so a lot of the towers are gearing up to open, I think in the next couple of weeks here. So you would fly in a helicopter. There you go. And yeah, you really gain sort of a bird's eye view of the forest, and you get to see what a lot of Albertans would never get to see. So it was.
You
and
Sorry, Trina, your connection froze just for a quick second there. We heard you say you get to see things that most people wouldn't get to see. Your 2019 fire season, you had something really interesting happen, and I would imagine a bit of a heart-stopping scenario in 2019 when you found yourself, was it in your tower or in your established location, kind of sandwiched between two big fires? Johnny, looks like our connection may have frozen. Hey? Let me know. Trina, can you hear me?
Yeah, I've got you now. Sorry
okay,
about that.
Yeah, no worries. I was asking about 2019. You find yourself sandwiched between two pretty huge towers. Your heart in your throat, I imagine. Can you take us back to that? People will recognize the names of those fires.
Yeah, absolutely. In 2019, I was sandwiched between the Chuckegg Creek fire, which was threatening communities, including High Level and the communities around High Level. And then to my southwest was the Battle River fire, which was threatening the community of.
Oh, dang it. We're talking to Trina Moyles, author and journalist, about her new piece in Alberta Views magazine in particular, Alberta is Burning. What are we going to do about it? This, Johnny, is a real reality check, and I kind of get the feeling. I mean, you kind of get you feel your heart in your throat a little bit when you're talking about this. Trina, looks like we've got you back. We're just going to keep working on this, and as the universe gives us good internet signal, we'll figure it out. The podcast listeners will never know what's happening here. They're not going to have any idea. So that Chuckegg Creek fire is threatening High Level, you were telling us.
Yeah, and it actually in late May it took what a lot of wildfire scientists are seeing is that there's much more fire activity at night than previously, and so one evening that fire took, I believe it was a 30-kilometer run overnight, which really shocked a lot of wildfire managers and wildfire scientists. And sadly, it destroyed 19 structures in the Métis community of Paddle Prairie. And then the following day, I was actually evacuated from my fire tower, not from the risk of fire itself, but from the risk of really heavy smoke. And of course, that's something I think a lot of Albertans and people right across the continent are feeling as a result of the intensifying wildfire crisis is the reality of now we have to live with smoke through our summers.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, I don't know why this stuck with me, but I remember seeing a news report out of Boston, Massachusetts, and they were talking about the air quality in Boston and how the biggest contributing factor to that was the wildfires in northern BC and northern Alberta, and that was just last summer. It feels like, I mean, this is now everybody's problem. Not to say that that's the only productive way to look at it, but this is something we cannot and should not ignore. I don't think it's a mistake that the team at Alberta Views gets you to write this piece for this issue, for the April issue, for the spring issue. The timing of this obviously makes sense from their editorial perspective. Everybody seems to be implying that this wildfire season is going to be a really bad one, and I guess it kind of sucks to acknowledge that they'll probably say the same thing the next year and the next year and the next year. Can you talk to us about why that is, why we are where we're at right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors to consider. I spoke with Dr. Mike Flanagan, who has 40 years of experience under his belt and is probably one of the leading voices on the wildfire situation right now. And I mean, he was really point blank about it. He was like, there's a lot of bit players. We can look at forestry management. We can look at a legacy of suppression in our forests. So, post World War II, the Alberta Forestry, division really took this, like, you see a fire, you hit it hard, you put it out immediately. But fire is a natural part of the boreal ecology. One wildfire scientist told me, fire in the boreals is natural as rain in the Amazon forest. We need fire to regenerate our forests. After nearly a century of putting fires out, we are left with, really old, dry forests. Climate change is real. Like, it's, we're seeing, look over the winter, we had in Alberta record-breaking temperatures, low snowpack. I've been seeing pictures of my former hometown, Peace River, incredibly dry in the hills, for like the last couple of months. So, folks weren't able to get out cross-country skiing this winter. These are the kinds of indicators that we're experiencing, climate change, the effects of climate change. And so Mike Flanagan said, batten down the hatches. It's only going to get worse from here. And we should expect the worst so we can be ready, because here we see, image of the Chuckegg Creek fire when that blew up in 2019. Like, the thing is it's like a lot of folks within Alberta Wildfire were really frustrated last spring when the wildfires broke out, because there's been, steady cuts to the agency over, probably the last like 8 years, and from different governments, right?
I'm so glad you said this, Trina. I want to jump in for a second, because I've heard this, like, conservatives, we got supporters of both parties and people that don't care about either party that listen to and watch this show. And I've had many conservatives say to me, Rachel Notley gets off the hook. People try to get Rachel Notley off the hook on this, but the NDP didn't support wildfire fighting efforts like they should have. And then the sort of the lefties, the centrists, look at the conservatives and say, well, they're cutting it and they're slashing it and they're not doing what they need to do. And it seems like, to make a blanket statement, nobody believes that any government has really taken this as seriously as they need to. What's your assessment on the outside of politics?
Yeah, I think it's pretty frustrating when you do work within the agency, because, Mike Flanagan said it, we can't do more with less. And if the agency has been steadily cut away, over the years, like, it's actually really putting communities at risk. And that's how we felt going into the 2023 season. I was not actually staffing one of the towers at that point, but I'd worked the 2022 season, and people don't realize at the end of that season in the fall, like, the fire seasons are starting earlier, they're going later. And we were seeing the type of fire activity that was concerning. And yet, seasonal staff were being, let go. And this is because of political cuts. This is not necessarily because of the agency. I give full credit to people within the agency and the boots on the ground. Alberta Wildfire is an amazing system. And, when you're a part of it, you really get how all of these moving pieces are coming together to protect communities. It's truly impressive. And it's probably one of the best wildfire responses in the world. And I fully believe that. But it's the politics. It is the politics and the policies and, these cutbacks that have really, it has really made it so challenging for people at the district level to be able to do what they do, because they're so short-staffed and people are getting seriously burnt out.
You're referencing Dr. Mike Flanagan. I just want to let people know if they want to hear like a 40-minute conversation with him. We talked to him on May 8th of last year. So, Trina, this is like as Alberta was burning. The episode is titled Fighting Fires, Literal and Political. That's our May 8th episode. We'll link to it in our show notes. You can't help but feel anxiety around this. And that's not necessarily, I don't think, the purpose of this conversation, nor your Alberta Views feature, nor any of your other writing. But following that 2023 wildfire season. By the way, do you like or dislike calling it wildfire season? I got an interesting email last year where it really stuck with me. Somebody wrote into the show and said, you're normalizing it by calling it wildfire season. Like we talk about hockey season or golf season, barbecue season. They said, we got to stop normalizing this. How do you feel about calling it wildfire season?
Well, for people who work within the industry, we call it fire season. And it's actually kind of like, to me, it's like a beloved phrase, because,
okay,
the way the agency is so effective is that seasonal staff who are on the front lines are attracted back to these positions year after year. And that expertise is critical. And that's another big issue I think that Alberta is facing right now, is retention. So, but it's for folks who are in it, like, it's more than a job. It is a lifestyle. It is a community. It is a family. Like, people come back to these jobs, year after year, and they love it. And, very passionate, intelligent, experienced people on the line. And so I think for me, the expression fire season is actually very beloved. I mean, but the reality, I think, with climate change now we're looking at is like, does fire season ever stop? Like, I mean, look at this winter with like an above average number of fires burning below the ground. And I mean, this is what we call holdover fires, and they're actually quite normal. It's normal to have like when you have a huge mega fire, it's normal for that fire to continue to burn over the winter. It burns deep in the peat and organic layers. But this year we did see, you know, an above average, I think it was almost like 10 times the normal the amount that people or that the province would normally get for these fires. So yeah, the fire season is it's only continuing to get longer and longer. I mean, this year I think the province stepped in and said that they were announcing it was starting like mid-February. So that's like a few weeks earlier. And I do want to acknowledge too that I was chatting with a couple of my former colleagues, and like their seasons are starting earlier this year, and that's a result of, you know, the devastating season we saw last year. But I also want to point out there was a lot of political pressure on the government last year. What surprised me as a journalist was just hearing or seeing the number of municipalities and counties that were speaking out about the lack of preparedness going into the 2023 season, or even in January, I believe, like the Alberta Chief Association of Fire, they released a letter like pressuring the government to say like, what are you doing differently with your staff this year? Like, we want to know what your plan is. And to me, that's very interesting to see and hear from the rural municipalities kind of speaking out and saying like, you know, we need to address the fact that the province wasn't ready last year, even though they say that they were.
For those that are watching this on YouTube, Johnny's showing some footage shot by an independent journalist by the name of Kyle Brittain, who we talked to on May 24th of 2023. If you want to go back in our archives and check that out, the title of that episode, Why Alberta Wildfires Are So Bad in 2023. And a shout out, by the way, to our Patreon supporters, our Real Talk patrons who helped us support Kyle and his work. How about this for a comment? If you're just tuning in right now, we're talking to Trina Moyles, a journalist, a former Wildfire Tower lookout resident. I think I just botched your job title there, by the way, Trina. but Alberta Rancher in our live chat, check this out, says we never had to worry much other than spring. When it came to fires, we now have to worry year-round. So much so, Alberta Rancher says, we bought our own fire truck to protect our ranch. We were left with no choice. Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, I think like we saw that last summer too. Like a lot of, individuals and like homeowners, landowners were like feeling like they needed to, you know, set their own protection measures in place. And I mean, and I think we all do have a role to play. I mean, even if you look at like Mike Flanagan was pointing out, like there are things the government could do, you know, like one of them is having a mandatory fire smarting around your home. So that means like cleaning up the debris, the small stuff that fires like grab onto and it increases wildfire spread. So the state of California has a, you know, mandatory smart fire smarting around their homes of 1.5 meters around the home, a buffer. And, you know, this kind of stuff can actually prevent fires from moving from property to property. So everybody does have a role to play in this. So I'm not surprised to hear of that landowner, you know, having, you know, feeling like they needed to take measures into their own hands to be ready.
I hosted for several years the Alberta Emergency Management Association. They had this like annual conference in Edmonton, and it would be like 500, you know, mayors, reeves, councillors, fire chiefs, you name it, in a room. It was incredible to them talk about fire smarting communities. They talked about steps that communities like Jasper have taken in some of the cutting and the cleaning that they've done. But what really stuck with me was, you know, those like cedar trees, you know, the ones I'm talking about, they're like pillars, kind of the tall cedars. And they showed a video of cedar trees right under like people nice and close to people's houses, right? And right under the soffits, basically, like right up against the eaves troughs, basically. And they showed some footage. I think it was the Slave Lake fire, if I remember correctly, but they showed these cedar trees catch, and anybody that's seen the PSAs from the fire departments and seen like a Christmas tree go up, know how quickly that goes. And it was just like a flamethrower. It was like a high-powered candlestick just underneath the roof of the house, just and it just caught the shingles and the whole house was going in and every time now There's one house in our neighborhood. I honestly want to ring their doorbell. Like, honestly, I want to intervene because they've got those cedars right up against the house. That's not the thing that the average person thinks about when they're landscaping or when they're working, because you never think it's going to happen to you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's such a good point. Like, the reality is we do need to see the landscape through this lens of fire. We need to think about, and like, what's your evacuation plan if a fire is threatening your community? That's another point that Dr. Mike Flanagan said. Like, every community should have a wildfire response plan in place. How do you get people out of that community if need be? Where do they go? What are people's plans? I mean, these are the things that individuals and then also communities, and then of course the government should be thinking about to be ready.
I've been lucky enough to speak with somebody that you did as well. As a matter of fact, you lead off your Alberta Views piece with her, Amy Cardinal Christensen, and Sharon in our live chat, a proud Métis. Sharon wonders, she asked me how many Indigenous folks were in that room with you at the Alberta Emergency Management Conference. I mean, actually, to Sharon's point, there were representatives from First Nations communities, but we're probably not talking about that reality geographically and otherwise in the context of wildfires, in the context of fire management, in the context of environmental stewardship. Can you take us into your conversation with Amy and what you learned from it?
Yeah, absolutely. I have so much respect for Amy's work. She's really such a force in Canada. And, according to Amy and her colleagues' research, 42% of the evacuation events across the country are First Nations communities. So, First Nations need to be, in a sense, leading these conversations on how wildfires are impacting communities and what we can do differently. And I think what a lot of folks don't realize is that when these fires threaten First Nations communities, it's not just structures that are at risk. It is traditional hunting grounds. It is, a lot of these communities are still very much reliant on, traditional hunting for subsistence. The Dene community of Châté in northern Alberta was evacuated 3 times last summer, 3 times. And in September, when, a lot of the media had sort of lost interest in wildfire at that point, we actually saw one of our most historic, events on September 23rd, the Bassett Fire, which had ignited in June and was threatening the communities of Châté around High Level there. And that fire took a 700,000 hectare run in one day. Like, that's crazy, and that really shocked scientists like Dr. Mike Flanagan. And if Dr. Mike Flanagan is shocked, then we should all be a little bit worried. And that fire actually cut off the power supply to the community of Châté. So a lot of people, lost all the food that they had, sort of food reserves in their freezers. So, they're huge issues concerning wildfires in First Nations communities. And Dr. Amy Cardinal Christensen said, she'd really like to see a fire guardian program put into place. And that would mean funding, 12 months of the year, not just during the fire season, but 12 months of the year for First Nations to sort of be taking leadership in their communities in terms of decision making, in terms of fire mitigation around their communities, what happens during evacuations, these kinds of things. So, because First Nations are so disproportionately affected by wildfire, they should absolutely be, leading conversations on what we can do differently.
MA says we're busy fire smarting at our farm right now, she says, putting sprinkler systems on the roof of our house. Says we have plans for firefighting equipment in our yard. MA says, I don't live in a forest, but grass fires are a reality. We kind of let I don't know why we do this. We look at, I remember reading somewhere that, in our hometown right now of Edmonton, that the Edmonton River Valley is 22 times the size of Central Park. For some reason, I think we feel, or some of us have led ourselves to believe that wildfire is not an issue in the urban centers, which is absolutely not true. Grass fires are a huge deal. You talk to any member of any fire department in any municipality in Western Canada, and they'll tell you that some of their new funding is going to these wildland firefighting units, these special trucks. We don't really think about the big cities, do we? But there's no reason why. I guess residents of Fort McMurray are going to be going hello, but it's something that I guess kind of maybe some of us think, well, this is happening in the Boreal Forest, and fire's always been part of the cycle, and fire's healthy, and we kind of, I guess, unless it lands in our own backyard, don't sound the alarm, so to speak, when it comes to our personal or political priorities. Is that a fair statement?
I think so. I mean, I think for someone who grew up in northern Alberta, I think that's very accurate. I mean, and it's not just for wildfire, it's a lot of things happening on the landscape. I think when you live in an urban center, especially where like political resources and resources are concentrated, sort of out of sight, out of mind of what's happening elsewhere, right? I mean, growing up in the north, like our communities have been dealing with wildfire for very many years and sometimes lacking, the support and the resources required to manage those fires. I mean, there's a great book called The Chinchaga Firestorm, and it's focused on the largest wildfire in Alberta's history, which happened in 1950. And, like there were community members of the Métis community of Keg River that were literally out on horseback trying to put out this massive fire because folks in Edmonton hadn't sent the adequate resources to help them manage the fire. So that's a really interesting book by Cordy Timstra out of the University of Alberta, the Chinchaga Firestorm. So yeah, I think that's a very accurate statement, and maybe this will put a little bit more political pressure on governments to be able to, like, we do need, Alberta Wildfire, needs more funding, needs more support to be able to do what they do, especially if, these wildfires are increasing in size, increasing in intensity, and, fire behavior that fire managers haven't seen before and is going to require additional resources. And they really need boots on the ground. That's a huge issue right now, is retaining firefighters, experienced firefighters, because yes, they're hiring an additional 100 firefighters this year, but those people don't yet have experience on the fire line, and that's really needed. You need leaders out there who are experienced working with wildfires and can respond to the intensifying behavior that we're seeing.
It's impossible. One of the more memorable moments of my career as a video journalist, as a videographer, was getting up in the chopper with Sustainable Resource Development and shooting visuals above a raging wildfire, and to try to, I mean, we always try to talk to people. I know, folks like you with experience can talk about hectares and things like that, but most people want to understand it in like how many football fields it is or what have you. But to see it from the air, it takes your breath away. I mean, in a sort of a power of nature way, but also just it's a little bit terrifying, to be honest. And then under escort, obviously, to be able to go down on the ground and head in there and watch these firefighters work. I don't know if I can imagine a more physically demanding job. Like it's absolutely wild what they're doing in there. And all this already, but I'll say to people, my experience, there's both an eerie silence and there's also this popping and this cracking, like trees literally almost exploding, right? As they're so hot, and there's people in there, humans with like saws and shovels, and sure, there's the water bombers and the choppers, and I want to talk to you about the human toll in just a second. But to try to have people understand the work that these firefighters are doing and the danger that comes with it is almost impossible to articulate.
Yeah, it's really demanding, grueling work. And, I think it's one of those professions that we can romanticize, but in reality, it's like, you're digging lines. You're working a chainsaw for 12 hours a day. Like, they're working really long. When these fires blow up, they're working really long shifts. And it's really demanding. And there's also like very little research that's been done on, the sort of the impacts of smoke and the harsh working conditions on worker safety and well-being. There was a study done that's looking at higher levels of cancer amongst wildland firefighters. They're really an underrepresented demographic of worker, in my opinion. And last year, there were 8 wildfire personnel that were lost in action and in between BC and Alberta, which was really devastating for our communities. And yeah, I mean, I think there needs to be a lot more attention on wildland firefighter personnel, and not just the frontline workers, but also the managers as well. In 2021, 57 management positions were cut in Alberta. That means fewer people at the decision-making level of managing these huge wildfires. The number of incident command teams was cut from 4 to 2. The incident command teams are the ones that go into communities when these huge fires are threatening them, to be able to make decisions, to manage crews, manage resources. And so last year you had managers who were working 6 to 7 deployments throughout the summer. That's totally exhausting. and is really having a negative impact on people's mental health and well-being.
What would just so we can understand as civilians, what would one deployment look like on average?
I believe that because I was in my fire tower, I was not actually ever on one of these deployments, I should say that. But I believe that they are usually around 2 weeks to sometimes 3 weeks.
Okay.
And you wake up and you go. I mean, you're sleeping in tents out or trailers out in camps. You're out in the bush. So the living conditions are a bit tough. And then, you wake up in the morning and you're on that fire. They're working crazy long hours. And doing everything they can to prevent the wildfires from threatening human values on the landscape. So I mean it's really difficult work, and I mean it's high pressure work. They're making they have limited resources that they're working with, and they have to make high level decisions, and that's those are not easy positions to be in. I'll say that.
Johnny, can you imagine fighting wildfires all day, hiking with a chainsaw, parched, sweating, hot, hurting, and then you come back and sleep in a tent, and then you wake up the next morning, crush a couple granola bars, and you're back at it?
No, I can't imagine. I have a lot of respect for wildfire fighters and all the ones that come in, because we're underfunded and we need to bring people in from Mexico and elsewhere. These are tireless workers, and a lot of respect to them.
Wild. Cherie is in our chat. We're talking to Trina Moyles. If you're just joining us, Cherie says, I'm very anxious up here in Peace River. There's been very little snow this winter. We have air purifiers all over the house. Cherie says it's going to be a nasty smoke season. Our hospital is laying out evacuation plans already. I guess on one hand, it's good to hear that the hospitals are planning for that. On the other hand, it sucks that they have to, right, Trina?
Yeah, exactly. It is. But I mean, I think it's a step in the right direction for preparedness. So I think, although this is they're hard conversations to have, and no one wants to think of these worst case scenarios, it's the right thing to do. I mean, we need to be prepared, and that comes down to households, and it comes down to municipalities, and then the provincial government as well.
So there are people talking about the this repel attack program being cut in 2019. Obviously, you've laid out for us by the numbers some of the positions that have either been eliminated or not been filled, or some of the budget cuts that are happening here, which I understand that there's polls across the budget. I understand that everybody has compelling arguments for why they need what they need out of Alberta's $50-ish billion budget, but this one just seems hard to justify. You spoke to the mayor of was it High Prairie, Mayor McAteer?
High level,
pardon me. And they have an interesting friendship agreement with a neighboring Indigenous community. I won't say they're taking matters into their own hands, but they're doing what they can to protect their community. Can you tell us about that, and maybe give us a sense of it, whether that's unique or maybe it could be a precedent?
I think it's very unique. I was really impressed to chat with Mayor McAteer, and she was saying that over the last number of years, they've been recognizing that the community of High Level is sort of it's a regional center for the neighboring communities. And so if there are these, evacuation events, like I said, the community of Chate was evacuated 3 times last year, and they went, the first place they go is High Level. So it is a hub for communities that are being evacuated in the northwestern corner of the province. And so they've been advocating, working with the Deneta First Nation, to be able to fund a regional center, a specialized wildfire evacuation center. That's a place where people can come, they can stay, they can access resources. There's food, there's maybe even like education for their children, because some of these communities are out of their homes, for weeks on end. And so, in previous evacuation years, like when they were threatened by the Chuckegg fire, like sometimes they're sending community members all the way down to Edmonton, and that's if you're from a very northern remote community, especially First Nations communities, there are a lot of cultural barriers in being sent down to an urban center. It makes sense to keep people closer to home. And so, their community is trying to rally the funds for this center to exist, which I think is really an amazing precedent, and maybe could be replicated elsewhere in the province as well, to try and keep people evacuations are going to happen, we know this, so let's try and keep people a little bit closer to home versus sending them to Edmonton or to Calgary. So
I'd be curious for your take on this, and I'll recognize that you were on Wildfire Tower lookout and not an arson investigator, but I do think you obviously have an informed opinion. I spoke with Alberta's Premier last June in this studio, and she made a comment on the show that made national news. And she basically, well, let me just read the headline, put out in a story by Colette Derwaritz of the Canadian Press, former colleague of mine at the Calgary Herald. Alberta Premier downplays link between wildfires and climate change. Commits to arson investigations. People, loyal listeners of this program will remember Danielle Smith basically said to me, we don't know about the cause of a lot of these fires, and we're looking into allegations of arson and this, that, and the other. Now, there have been, over the course of the last number of years, charges laid, arson charges laid as relating to many wildfires. But something about what Danielle Smith said on Real Talk really, I'm not using the word disparagingly, but it really triggered a lot of people. It pissed a lot of people off. What's your assessment based on your lived experience as a professional? How much of this was arson, do you think? How much is lightning? How much is ATVs? How much of it is cigarette butts? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it differs season to season. Arson can happen. To me, last year, what we saw coming from politicians, these are political distractions, in my opinion, and they actually hurt us all. And I say that not being, in support of either political party, but I mean, they're distractions. Like, our wildfire scientists with, decades of experience are telling us that we're seeing, increasingly dry, hot conditions that are, starting fires and then also, contributing to their spread. And so it's usually around, I believe in Alberta, I'm not sure of the statistics exactly from last year, but it's I believe lightning caused fires around 40% of the fires in Alberta. And sometimes the lightning fires are actually the ones that have will burn over a larger area. And that's because they're happening in typically in the northern part of our province where the Boreal Forest is situated. So that's actually quite normal for these large lightning fires to take off. I mean, to be exhibiting the kind of fire behavior that we're seeing from them, that is not normal. That is something new. That is definitely being aggravated by climate change. So I think the whole arson thing last year was a distraction from what has been happening, not just last season, but, over the last 20, 30 years, what they've been seeing, these intensifying conditions and behaviors in wildfires. So, but I do want to say too, Mike Flanagan was talking about mandatory forest closures. No one in Alberta is going to like that. That's a very unpopular thing.
That's my next question.
We do know that most of our worst wildfires tend to start in this window of time, what we're in right now, and happened much earlier in Alberta this year when the snow melts and, the forest is yet to green up, so leaf out. And this is a really critical period of time where these fires can ignite. They can start from an ATV, they can start from a cigarette butt, they can start from a downed power line. The wind blows a power line down and then the line ignites a wildfire. So these are really critical times. Forest closures are exactly like they sound, limiting human activity in the bush. And no one likes that. But also, no one likes living with smoke and no one likes being evacuated from their communities. So these are the kinds of kind questions that we're going to have to be asking ourselves in future years.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I want to wrap with that. I mean, you kind of just answered the question, but I was just going to ask you about people's personal sacrifice. Let's call it what it is. Like for some, I can think of, we have this group, the Outdoorsman Social Club, shout out to them. And every summer we try to get out for, between 70 and 100K and get our fishing lines in the water. And we go where there's no cell phone reception. And it's just this wonderful time to recharge. However, obviously wildfires have factored into those in recent years, including fire bans. And, it kind of sucks to hike all day and not have a fire at night, but it's also a small price to pay for, not starting a forest fire. But there are a number of different applications or a number of different implications, I should say, that this could have on people, whether that's limiting access to the backcountry, whether it's limiting camping access, fire bans, or otherwise. How much should people, do you think, with intuitive and science-informed policy, let's keep our fingers crossed for that, how much should the individual be prepared to sacrifice, a word that politicians won't use, to ensure that we can all do our part? How much of it is up to us?
I mean, I think it's when we look at the stats of how many human-caused fires occur year to year. There you go. Okay, 61.9% from 2023 were caused by people. I mean, I think to me, it's a no-brainer. Do you care about your home? Do you care about your community? Do you care about your farmers? We do have to take these things into consideration when we recreate on the landscape. How are we coupable? Are we responsible for some of these wildfires? And it turns out we are. So, I mean, to me, it's like with what we're seeing in terms of communities being threatened and literally burnt over, like communities in northern Alberta last year, East Prairie, which is a Métis community around High Prairie, I believe lost 40 structures. Fox Creek was a community that lost around 80 structures. Like the risk is really real. And, there have been other seasons where communities in southern Alberta are also threatened or there's structural loss. So we all have a role to play. And I think that is being informed by what, Alberta Wildfire is telling us in terms of limiting human behavior in the forests. And yeah, I mean, do we care about our communities? Do we care about the places we recreate in too? I think that's another thing to point out is that, last year, 2.2 million hectares of forest. Like if that kind of scale of loss occurred every year, we would have no forests left or we would have no places to recreate. So if we care about our landscape and our communities, then we do need to adhere to some of the bans and limitations on human behavior in the bush that, the government puts into place.
You said 2.2 million hectares burned?
I believe that's the number.
Okay, so like 2.5 football fields in 1 hectare. Okay, so you're talking like 6 million football fields. I promise to never do math live in a show, but approximately that's about 6 million football fields for people that need a perspective check. That's unbelievable. Before we cut you off, or thank you for your time. Let me be more positive. Amazing to have you on the show, Trina. Your expertise is so appreciated. I want to shout this out to Ken as well, because Ken does make a good point. I'm not an expert, but it strikes me as a pretty good point. And he says the ignition point, whether that could be an ATV or a cigarette butt or a lightning strike or whatever, the ignition point is not the same as the reason for the scale of the fire. That's another point to make, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And if I said that before and it made it seem like I believe that they're two separate things.
No, sure. But I just think that Ken makes a really good point, which is like if climate change and other contributing factors, but the lion's share of the conversation, I think here, when you talk to the experts, not just you, but all the conversations that we've had, people are talking about climate change. And so whether the fire starts, whether it's arson or a cigarette butt or an ATV or whatever, the fact that the forests are so primed to explode is a relevant factor and a bigger piece of that conversation. If someone can simply say, there was an arsonist at large and we caught the arsonist, so everybody can relax, that's not the reality.
Yeah, the reality is fires are going to start in a number of different ways, whether that's natural or human caused. And then, as you said, too, the conditions that we're seeing in our forest right now and the pressure of climate change will contribute to the spread.
Trina, we're so grateful, number one, for your availability here, your experience, your incredible writing. Number two, that you were able to save some time to really dig into this story, because I know that it is one of great concern to a great number of people. Thank you for the work that you've done in the Alberta issue of the April issue of Alberta Views magazine. That's Alberta is Burning. We've been talking to Trina Moyles, who is also the author of Lookout: Love, Solitude, and Searching for Wildfire in the Boreal Forest. Hey, would you promise to come back and talk to us again when your new book, Black Bear, is out, about human-bear coexistence? I'm fascinated with that subject matter.
Yeah, I would love to. That would be great. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Okay, Trina. Well, and sorry to keep you waiting while we were talking politics. That happens sometimes, but we always appreciate that. And we'll talk to you as soon as your next book's out again.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you got it. You can follow Trina on Twitter and Instagram. And, of course, invite you to share this interview with anybody that you think might benefit hearing from it. You can read Trina's feature in its entirety at albertaviews.ca. Alberta Views is the magazine for engaged citizens. And here's the deal, friends. We invite you. We ask you to support independent, fact-checked journalism like you see in Alberta Views with the promo code AVRJ. That's Alberta Views, Ryan Jesperson, AVRJ. AVRJ. The promo code will knock 50% off a 1-year subscription to Alberta Views. Here's some math I can do live on the show, Johnny. That means that you're going to pay $20 total for 10 issues delivered right to your door. $20 with the promo code AVRJ at albertaviews.ca.
It's a steal. And I looked it up. So, there's a bit still under investigation, but last year 8.4% was deemed arson out of all of that, which is less than 200. I think it's like 250 hectares, and you're talking about 2.2 million, right? So we're talking about a very small amount of fires that they investigated and found out were arson in 2023. That's from albertawildfires.ca.
Wow.
So it's if the other 90% is what we need to focus on, right? People throwing cigarette butts, ATVs, all the human caused stuff. And then, of course, we have to account for the stuff that just happens naturally by lightning, by heat, by all these other things. So that's what we need to focus on, not this little 8% that is arson, which of course we should try to tackle that as well. But it's the other 90% that we really need to hit up. Right?
Yeah, no kidding. Well said. We've got, obviously a ton of comments here in the live chat. We appreciate that. If something that you heard has resonated with you and you want to send us an email, put a little more thought and a little more time into it, talk at Ryan Jesperson is where you can find us. I like this comment from Jordan who says, you got to hand it to those arsonists who are willing to trek into the bush like 500 kilometers, light a fire, and then somehow get out of there. Which is, it's not to say that arson's not an issue.
No.
That is an issue, but it's not the only issue.
It's a small piece.
And I think the reason why, if you look at some of the reporting around that interview that we did with Premier Smith last June, where she basically said, we're looking into arsonists, we're looking into these reports, we don't know the cause of a lot of these fires. People are saying, listen, arson can be part of this problem.
Sure.
And if there's a fire bug or fire bugs out there, that is obviously a real issue. But that doesn't mean, I think a lot of people go, oh, it's climate change? No, it's arson. It's like, no, these are not one or the other.
And they see a chart like we threw up here, and they think human-caused automatically means arson. It does not. Human-caused is all the things you were talking about. People out camping who don't put out fires properly. People who may put shrubbery next to their houses and then throw a cigarette butt in a potted plant, or ATVs, and you leave the, hot motors. People you using a truck or an SUV to get out to a camping spot and not realizing they just drove 2.5 hours, and that motor, that catalytic converter under your vehicle is a fire starter. Yeah,
totally. Travis makes a very good point. He says these are obviously not beta male arsonists. These are definitely alpha arsonists.
Takes an alpha to start a wildfire.
And Tony goes, what's that promo code for Alberta Views? It's AVRJ. AVRJ at albertaviews.ca. This is not like some sort of like a cute mention. This is not a cute ad read. But as we talk about wildfire and communities impacted, I want to recommend you and remind you that if your family, if your business is, heaven forbid, impacted by fire or flood, or black mold, or asbestos, or you name it, Complete Care Restoration has been rebuilding people's properties, restoring communities, rebuilding peace of mind for a quarter century. Professional property restoration services in Edmonton. They respond 24/7. As a matter of fact, their teams, some of their teams are still and currently working on rebuilding communities that were razed by last year's wildfires. These guys know what they're doing. There's nobody that's better in the business, and we recommend them with 2 thumbs up. Hopefully you never have to check out their website, but if you find yourself in that tough spot, you can find them at completecarerestoration.ca. Also wanted to mention, we've talked a lot about expertise. We've talked a lot about science. How about engineers? If you're a PEng and you're looking for a new opportunity, you feel like you're not reaching your true potential, you want to join a dynamic team that is doing amazing work in the automation space across Western Canada, even down into the Lone Star State. Check out the careers link at Apex Automation today. ApexAutomation.ca is where you can find the details on what they're doing in fabrication, automation, engineering, Industry 4.0. I love the stuff they're doing with autonomous vehicles. Super cool. Plus a lot of work in the energy industry, potash mining in Saskatchewan, and a ton more. You'll find them online at apexautomation.ca. Coming up on Real Talk this Friday, wanted to put this on your radar as we wrap. We'll present another Real Talk roundtable, and we talk a lot about alternative energy sources. We're talking a lot about people's utility bills. How much do you know about hydrogen. We've got three of, as far as I'm concerned, the most reputable experts in the province that are going to be joining us on Friday's Real Talk. What could be the implications for your home, for new communities, for the bottom line as we consider Alberta and Canada's energy future? That's coming up later this week, right here on Real Talk.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford,